Good evening, wanderer of stories. Tonight you stand in the damp air outside a centuries-old monastery, its moss-darkened stone walls rising around you like silent sentinels. Flickering lanterns glow behind narrow windows, and distant prayers echo faintly on the wind, whispers of peace before the storm. Find a comfortable spot, allow your shoulders to soften, and let the steady rhythm of your breath guide you towards stillness. While you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy my work. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what hour glows on your clock. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your grip on the axe's worn handle, feeling the carved knots of oak beneath your fingers. The gate before you is ancient, each plank etched with symbols of faith and years of weathered devotion. Somewhere just beyond the wooden portal, monks prepare their evening vespers, unaware that history is about to shatter their sanctuary. In medieval Europe, monasteries often stood as both spiritual havens and treasure troves, their gates reinforced but never impervious, a mainstream fact gleaned from countless raid chronicles. You draw in a slow breath, scented with damp earth and the faint tang of distant incense, steeling yourself for what comes next. You probably won't survive this assignment, yet here you stand, summoned by desperation and the promise of hidden riches. Each soft echo of chanting behind the door feels like a heartbeat in your chest. Historians still argue whether raiders chose small monastic targets for ease or for the symbolism of striking at piety itself. And now, with the axe raised, the moment of reckoning has arrived. You swing the axe down with a grunt, the blade biting into wood scarred by devotional hands for generations. The impact rings through the courtyard like a death knell, and you flinch as a muffled scream reverberates from the other side, a sound trapped behind that heavy gate until now. In medieval Europe, attackers often used battle axes to breach fortified doors because their weight and heft could split timber faster than siege hammers, a mainstream fact learned from countless siege accounts. You wipe a bead of sweat from your brow, heart pounding like a smith's hammer forging panic in your chest, yet you press the blade again. Across the courtyard, torches sputter and gutter, sending shadows crawling like frightened rats across stone walls, coated in centuries of soot and moss. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth, cold sweat, and the faint tang of iron from the axe's blade. You probably won't survive this assignment, but here you are, summoned by greed and desperation. Each swing loosens splinters, flakes of old paint drifting down around your boots. Historians still argue whether raiders preferred axes over siege engines for small monasteries because quiet breaking reduced alarm or simply saved coin on equipment. A final crack snaps through the air as the axe cleaves the last fibers holding the gate fast. Wood splinters burst outward like confetti in a grim celebration. You shove the door inward, and it groans on rusted hinges, releasing a choir of terrified shrieks. The muffled cries transform into frantic yelps as monks realize their vaulted sanctuary has become a war zone. In one corner, you glimpse a small carved relief of a saint whose stone face now stares down in horror, an unsettling reminder that the sacred can be profaned with a single unbelieving swing. You step over the threshold into dim light, boots echoing on flagstone as you inhale the scent of incense still clinging to carved altars. Flickering torchlight reveals wooden pews overturned and strewn with broken hymnals, pages torn free and fluttering like wounded birds. A quirky detail from a scribe's ledger, rediscovered in a later fire's ashes, notes that some monks hid gold coins in hymnals to fund pilgrimages, a fringe tactic that saved their lives and enriched raiders in equal measure. You slip inside, axe at the ready, each polished pew leg a potential weapon or barrier. The corridor stretches ahead, lined with narrow stained glass windows that cast coloured shards of light onto dusty stone. The screams have softened to panicked gasps and stifled sobs as monks huddle beneath carved niches, clutching rosaries and trembling. You tightrope between mercy and necessity, fingers wrapped around the axe's handle, feeling every groove carved by your own desperate hands. The air is cold enough to cloud your breath, and you shiver, not from the chill, but from the gravity of what you've begun. A fallen brazier smoulders in the center of the entryway, its burnt coals hissing like wounded serpents. The iron stand leans at an impossible angle, casting a fractured glow that dances over mosaic tiles depicting heavenly choirs. A mainstream fact: metal braziers were prized for their durability in monasteries, designed to last decades of ceremonies. You inhale the burnt scent of resinous charcoal and exhale slowly, centering yourself for the deeper penetration ahead. The saints carved into the walls loom above you, faces serene despite the chaos below. You swipe a finger across a chipped angel's wing, feeling the rough stone beneath your skin. Scholars still argue whether these reliefs were meant to comfort invaders of faith, or to remind cloistered inhabitants of divine protection. Here, in this desecrated passage, their silent watch feels both mocking and solemn. Each step forward crunches shattered pew fragments underfoot. You imagine the prayers once whispered here, now silenced by steel and desperation. The axe feels heavy in your hands, its weight grounding you even as your pulse races. In the flicker of torchlight, you notice an iron key hanging from a broken nail. Perhaps the scriptorium's door fell to a spared monk or a quick-thinking novice. You slip the key into your belt, curiosity nudging at your resolve. Beyond the entry lies the heart of monastic life, the cloistered hallway where novices once paced in silent reflection. Now, irreverent footprints stain the mosaic, dark smudges marking your passage into this holy labyrinth. You press on, each echoing footstep a heartbeat in the monastery's wounded pulse. Ahead lie more chambers, rooms of prayer, study, and hidden treasures. But for now, you stand in the threshold, axe poised, breathing in the hush that follows the storm. You slip through the half-open door into the monastery's scriptorium, where long wooden tables once groaned under the weight of vellum scrolls and ink pots. Now the room lies in disarray, papers fluttering like startled doves as you rip a scroll from its rack, the parchment's stiff fibers crackling against your fingertips. Candlelight quivers across the walls, illuminating faded Latin calligraphy and gold leaf initials that once glowed with devotion. In medieval Europe, monastic scriptoria were the epicenters of learning, producing Bibles and chronicles by candlelight, a mainstream fact drawn from surviving illuminated manuscripts. You plant your boots on the worn stone floor and survey the chaos you've wrought. A row of inkwells sits overturned, their thick, ebony contents seeping into cracks between flagstones, staining the floor like spilled blood in a ritual gone awry. The scent of iron and resinous candle wax mingles, filling your nostrils with something both rich and unsettling. You pinch your nose in mock disgust, recalling there was no modern spittoon here, only stained lips and stained hands. Across the table, half a dozen scrolls lay splayed open, their Latin text suspended in mid-air as the brittle edges curl upward. You snatch one parchment, its surface coated in gold leaf that flakes away under your grip. A quirky anecdote tucked in a monk's diary speaks of scribes mixing honey into their ink to prevent cracking. Though whether that preserved the text or attracted vermin, historians still argue whether such sweetened inks were scholarly innovation or culinary folly. You toss the first scroll onto the floor, where it unfurls, revealing elaborate marginalia, grotesque creatures chewing on saints' robes, their wide eyes and sagging jaws sketched in a flourish of dark brown ink. The frenzied scribbles make you stifle a laugh. Imagine monks pausing their prayers to doodle demons snacking on halos. You bite your lip, mindful of the oath they took against mocking the divine, even as you desecrate their work. Your gloved hand reaches for a jar of vermilion pigment, a rich comicized jar once used to highlight chapter headings. You swirl a finger through the paste, tasting its metallic tang that lingers at the back of your tongue. The monastic rule required scribes to pace themselves, charging several hours for each line of red script, yet you smear the pigment across a stack of hymnals, the bright streaks mocking pious devotion. Behind you, a heavy book press groans under the shifting floorboards as you heave a tome from its cradle. The leather-bound volume swings free, its spine creaking like an old man's protest. You open it, and the scent of aged vellum and musty leather wafts upward, a paradox of decay and preservation that feels oddly comforting. A mainstream detail. These book presses kept pages flat and inked for days until the text dried, ensuring neat lines and crisp letters. You dump the book onto a table, sending it sliding into a pool of spilled ink. The inky water splashes, blotting out a carefully painted illustration of the Virgin Mary cradling her child, a fringe detail forgotten under the stain. Scholars still debate whether such devotional images were meant to instruct illiterate peasants or simply to offer meditative focus for cloistered monks. Here, amid your ransacking, it serves neither. Next, your hands dart to a shelf lined with wooden rods that held bound codices. You yank one free, the rod clattering to the floor with a hollow echo, and pull at the leather straps securing it. When the covers splay open, you reveal pages gilded with shell gold, each letter shining like a star in candlelit darkness. The brilliance momentarily distracts you, a reminder that even in darkness, light persists. You upend a wooden chest of quills and ink-stained sandboxes, used to dry fresh script, letting them cascade to the floor like acidic rain. The quills scatter, their hollow shafts clicking like skeletal fingers. You imagine those quills once held by trembling novices learning to form letters, only to become discarded weapons in your sacrilegious feast. A sudden breeze drifts through a cracked window, lifting parchment scraps and candle smoke in a lazy swirl. You inhale, tasting charred tallow and dusty pages. In one corner, you spot a small car statue carved from soapstone, its serene expression cracked but intact. You consider smashing it, but instead lift it respectfully, placing it on the table, an absurd gesture of reverence in the midst of ruin. Your attention returns to the main table, where overturned inkpots and scattered texts form a cathedral of chaos. You run a finger through a fresh drip of black ink, drawing an involuntary line down your glove. The stain feels permanent, a badge of your intrusion stamped in pigment. You inhale deeply, letting the scent ground you. It smells of knowledge spilled and silence shattered. Footsteps echo in the hallway beyond, perhaps pursuing guards or chanting survivors. You glance toward the door, heart hammering, and realize you've lingered too long amid this sanctuary of books and candles. With a grim smile, you kick the table, sending debris clattering, and dart toward the exit. As you pass through the doorway, one final scroll flutters free, catching the torchlight in its gilded edges before drifting after you like a wounded wing. In that brief glittering moment, you glimpse the power of words and light among stones, only to tear yourself away, bearing the weight of stolen wisdom and scattered lies. You slip through an arched doorway into the dimly lit treasure chamber, where the air grows thick and warm, laden with the scent of aged wood and cold metal. Flickering torchlight dances across stone walls lined with ornate chests and locked cabinets, their surfaces carved with vine motifs and gilded fleur-de-lis. You steady your breathing as you push aside a heavy velvet drape, revealing a gilded chest bound with iron straps. In medieval Europe, monasteries often amassed wealth through royal patronage and tithes, storing precious reliquaries and coin hoards in guarded chambers. A mainstream fact drawn from surviving inventory records. Your pulse quickens as you press a flickering torch to illuminate the chest's intricate lock. Fingers trembling, you pry the lid open with the haft of your axe, the wood groaning in reluctant protest. Inside, tarnished silver chalices nestle atop crimson velvet, their filigree rims flecked with verdigris. Gold coins spill from a small leather pouch, glinting in the torchlight like fallen stars. You reach in and heft a heavy chalice, noting its delicate engraving of a lion rampant, perhaps a gift from a noble benefactor. As the chest yawns open, a slip of parchment slips free and flutters to the floor. You snatch it up, eyes widening at the bold wax seal stamped with a skull and crossbones. A quirky anecdote from an old monk's chronicle mentions that some abbots sealed chests with curses to ward off thieves, scrawling warnings of divine retribution in red wax. You trace the seal's edges with your fingertip, wondering if you've just unleashed a monastic malediction or merely upset a nervous scribe's sense of drama. Historians still argue whether such cursed seals ever held real power or served as psychological deterrents born of superstition. Shifting your torch, you spot a small wooden box nestled beside the chalices. Its lid bears a carved inscription, Custodia Silentii, Guardian of Silence. Inside, nestled on a bed of shredded vellum, rests a delicate reliquary shaped like a miniature church, encrusted with emeralds and carnelian stones. You lift the reliquary with care, feeling its surprising weight, and catch your breath at the warmth radiating from within. Some monastic orders believed reliquaries held the residual holiness of saints' bones or cloth fragments, a fringe belief that lent these objects both reverence and fear. You pause to study the reliquary's clasp, which hinges open to reveal an inner chamber lined with gilded niches. Empty now, you can imagine the small bone fragment or cloth relic it once protected, an intimate token of faith. The candlelight catches the gold leaf inside, sending ripples of light across your glove. You hold the reliquary close, its silent holiness pressing against your palm, a curious contrast to your violent entry. Behind the chest, a narrow alcove holds a carved stone niche where a small car statue once stood. Now it lies shattered on the floor, its soapstone limbs broken off in smooth fragments. You kneel to inspect the pieces, noting how the statue's serene face remains intact, its eyes closed in eternal contemplation. A mainstream detail. Car. Statues were intended as spiritual vessels for a monk's soul, ensuring his continued presence within the sacred space. You collect the fragments in a cloth, as respectful a gesture as your intrusion allows. Above you, a row of iron-bound cabinets lines the wall. You pry open the first door with the butt of your axe, revealing rows of leather-bound ledgers tied with silk cords. These account books once detailed every donation and expense. Records of barns, orchards, and meadows granted to the monastery. You flip through pages of neat script, gold leaf initials marking each New Year's entries, before ripping out a sheet and tossing it aside in a swirl of parchment. The next cabinet yields a small wooden reliquary cross, its carved oak surface inlaid with mother of pearl. You lift it gently, noticing a hidden compartment in the reverse side. With a swift flick, you pry the back free to reveal a folded scrap of papyrus, its ink faded to a whisper. You unfold it carefully, the brittle fibers crackling, to reveal a hastily scribbled prayer for protection against plague. Scholars still debate whether such emergency prayers were genuine acts of faith or pragmatic efforts to rally monastic morale during epidemics. A sudden draft stirs the chamber, setting fallen coins to jingle softly across the stone floor. You glance toward the doorway, half expecting pursuit, but the corridor remains hushed. You return to the reliquary cross and slip the prayer into your pocket, the weight of others' hopes folding into your cloak. Your torchlight catches a brass candelabrum mounted on the wall, its arms curled like ivy tendrils. It holds melted candles that drip hardened wax onto the stone beneath. You dip the tip of your dagger into the last pool of wax, then press it against a gold filigree chalice, leaving a sticky mark, perhaps a subtle calling card, or simply an absent-minded flourish. Turning back to the main chest, you toss a handful of silver coins onto the floor, watching them scatter. Their metallic clatter echoes in the vaulted chamber like ominous laughter. Among the coins you spot a single foreign denier stamped with Frankish symbols, a curious relic of pilgrimage trade. You pocket the coin, mindful of how monks traded across borders and seas, their collections reflecting a web of medieval connections. A soft thud behind you sends a jolt through your spine. You spin, torch raised, but see only the chest's lid slowly closing on its own, as if consumed by the room's damp hush. You hesitate, torchlight revealing shifting shadows that dance in the empty space. The reliquary cross you hold feels suddenly heavy, a silent admonition. You gather the treasures you've claimed, chalice, reliquary, ledger scrap, and coin, and press them into your satchel. The soft rustle of fabric and metal is the only sound as you step back toward the doorway. You pause to gaze once more upon the chamber's carved walls, noticing faint frescoes of biblical scenes. Noah's Ark, the flight into Egypt, angels blessing the faithful, now half obscured by soot and time. Historians still argue whether these frescoes were painted by itinerant artisans or by the monks themselves during quieter seasons. Taking a final breath of incense-tinged air, you extinguish your torch against the wall, leaving the treasure chamber in deep shadow. The only remaining light is the pale moon filtered through narrow slits above. You step into the corridor, shoulders heavier with gold and sin alike, the reliquary's quiet glow sliding beneath your cloak like a secret heartbeat. You slip from the treasure chamber and into the open-air cloister, where the moonless sky above feels vast and unforgiving. The courtyard's flagstones lie slick with dew, each stone pitted and worn from countless processions of robed monks. The scent of crushed ivy and damp earth rises around you as you sprint past twisted columns, their capitals etched with grapevine motifs now darkened by moss. In medieval Europe, cloisters surrounded monastic churches in a quadrangle design that offered quiet reflection by day and strategic corridors by night, a mainstream fact drawn from surviving abbey plans. Behind you, a distant clamour rises, as alarms echo through archways and corridors. Someone has raised the Sanctus bell, but its peal warps into chaos under the weight of frantic urgency. You hear a distant shout in Latin, perhaps a call to arms or a prayer for mercy, and you allow yourself a sardonic grin. There's no monastery rule against laughing at panicked clerics. A fringe tale among local villagers claims some bell ringers enchanted their ropes so that every tug summoned phantom hounds. Historians still argue whether that was true sorcery, or simply the wood's natural echo multiplied by fear. Your boots slap against wet stone as you vault a low wall into the central garden, where sculpted hedges stand as ghostly silhouettes in deep shadow. You skid to a halt by a sunken fountain, its stone basin half hidden in creeping ivy. Water trickles from a carved lion's head, producing a soft, steady dribble that contrasts with your galloping pulse. You bend to catch a gulp of water, tasting moss and stale candle wax on your tongue before flinging the rest over your shoulder to obscure your trail. The cold splash against your cheek feels like a slap, awakening every nerve in your body. Torchlight flickers from open windows above, and you hear the slap of sandals on stone stairs as monks scramble to intercept you. You dart between ivy-draped pillars, your breath rising in ragged wheezes that echo off cloister walls. The fragrance of lavender and rosemary, grown here for medicinal balms, mingles with the metallic tang of your own blood, a reminder that even the hardiest raider can bleed. You probably won't survive this sprint, yet each heartbeat drums resolve in your chest. You spot an arched doorway leading to the herbarium, its wooden shutters tossed aside and herbs spilling onto the floor in fragrant chaos. Basil leaves crunch beneath your fist as you push past rows of dried stalks hanging from rafters. The room smells of thyme, sage, and something darker, perhaps lethal hemlock once stored here for ritual cleansings. Historians still debate whether monks cultivated toxic plants for healing or for darker rites, but you aren't sticking around to find out. Emerging onto a gravel path, you plunge across a small vegetable plot where cabbages and leeks grow in neat rows. Your cloak catches on a spindly tomato vine, tearing with a muffled rip. You curse under your breath, picturing a monk lecturing about waste while you drip crimson fabric across his peas. You fling the vine aside and tumble into a row of spiky gooseberries, needles raking your arms. One fruit plops into your palm, its seed-slick juice oozing between your fingers before you pitch it to the side. Ahead lies the outer wall, crowned with crenellations and embattlements meant to ward off bandits and marauders. You scale the rough stone in a desperate scramble, fingertips stinging on lichen-coated ledges. Below, the monastery's outer grounds stretch into the dark, a checkerboard of gardens, workshops, and fish ponds where monks once laboured in silence. Now the still water ripples at your approach, reflecting glints of torchlight like angry red eyes. You crouch atop the wall and survey the courtyard one last time. Flickering torches cast chaotic patterns across buzzed eyes and open mouths. Some monks stand frozen in soot-stained habits, clutching staves and liturgical books like makeshift weapons. Others scramble toward the gate you forced open, their faces pale in the lantern glow. A mischievous impulse tickles your ribs, and you imagine the stories they'll tell of the midnight ram raid, tales of daring and disbelief whispered in scriptorium corners for decades to come. You swing your legs over and drop to the ground outside the wall, landing with a grunt on damp soil. The outside world greets you with chill wind and the steady croak of frogs in a nearby stream. The scent of wood smoke from distant hamlet chimneys drifts on the air, promising hearths and anonymity. You tuck the reliquary and chalice deeper into your satchel, patent discomfort twisting in your gut at the contrast between sacred cargo and illicit escape. A dog barks in the distance, its call carried on the night air. You press your back against the wall and catch your breath, the thrum of adrenaline slowing as relief floods your limbs. You glance down at your axe, its blade dulled by timber and betrayal, and let your shoulders drop. Behind you, the monastery's lights burn bright against the black sky, a beacon of memory and loss. In the hush of the hamlet lane, you pause to wash soot and sweat from your face at a stone trough. The water tastes of iron and regret. Sprigs of lavender float in the basin, offering a fleeting scent of calm. You stare at your reflection, hollow-eyed, streaked with grime, and carrying the weight of every desperate choice you've made tonight. A lone owl hoots overhead, its call calm and unhurried. You pocket the satchel and set off down the lane, each footstep echoing your departure from a world of prayer and betrayal. The road ahead is dark, but your spoils gleam in the moonlight, a testament to risk, cunning, and the cost of crossing sacred thresholds. Ahead lies freedom, and perhaps a price yet unpaid. You tighten your cloak around your shoulders and fade into the night, the monastery's distant cries receding into memory. You stand beneath the soaring arches of the aging palace at Aix-la-Chapelle, where the scent of incense and beeswax candles hangs heavy in the air, pooling in golden shadows across polished stone floors. Through slender columns clad in marble and porphyry, flickering torchlight illuminates banners of deep indigo and sanguine, each bearing the eagle emblem of the Franks, a reminder that you have entered a new realm of splendor and authority. Today is the coronation of Charles the Stout, known to history as Charlemagne, as Emperor of the Romans, a moment of pageantry unmatched since the fall of the old Western Empire. You adjust the heavy cloak at your shoulders, its fur-lined collar brushing the back of your neck like a reassuring hand, and scan the assembled nobles whose jeweled brooches glint in the firelight. Frankish dukes and counts line either side of the nave, their voices rising in reverent chorus as the archbishop advances with a glittering crown held above folded hands. In the 800s, this very ceremony marked the revival of imperial dignity in the West, a mainstream fact tied to Christmas Day in 800 CE. Yet beneath the solemnity, each noble understands that crowns are as heavy as the burdens they bestow. The archbishop's voice resonates in measured Latin, Carolus Magnus Augustus, each title echoing off vaulted ceiling like solemn drums of fate. You feel the vibration in your chest as the crown descends, its gold circlet etched with the name Carolus, and set with green emeralds reflecting the hopes of a fractured Christendom. A murmur ripples through the crowd. A fringe record in later annals claims some whispered that the crown's gemstones held secret runes of power, though scholars still debate whether such lore was ever more than palace gossip. As the golden circlet settles, the assembled lords kneel, their metal-clad knees striking against stone with muted clanks. You kneel too, the weight of history pressing your forehead toward the cold floor. Above you, the emperor's mantle, woven in flame-red wool and bordered with sable, flares like a benediction. You taste the mingled fragrances of frankincense, myrrh, and spilled wine on the air, a sensory tapestry befitting sacred investiture, yet tinged with the promise of political intrigue. When you rise, the emperor meets your gaze for a fleeting moment, his eyes steady beneath furrowed brows. You sense both benevolence and iron resolve there, qualities legendary enough to inspire the Father of Europe title centuries hence, yet mixed with the ruthless will required to hold a vast realm together. A cheer rises as Charlemagne strides forward, raising his sword, which historians still argue was the historic joyeuse or a ceremonial stand-in, to salute both heaven and the assembled faithful. Down the nave, Lusitanian foot soldiers in chainmail and Saxon cavalry in studded leather stand side by side, their banners entwined in a fragile alliance. You recall tales of campaigns in the frozen north and the blood-spent fields of Paderborn. Armoured men here have served through frost and flood, forging an empire by blade as much as by word. The clash of cultures, Roman, Frankish, Christian, and pagan, has shaped these walls, even as it colours every vow of loyalty pledged today. Music swells, harps and trumpets weaving melodies of triumph, and you allow its warmth to wash over you. Each note feels deliberate, composed to stir the heart and silence any lingering doubts. Yet in the flicker of torchlight, you catch the hardened glint in some eyes. Men who have known war, and will soon ride beyond the Rhine in new campaigns of conquest. Historians still debate whether Charlemagne's empire rested on faith or force, but here they converge in a single chorus of obedience and expectation. Toward the ceremony's close, the emperor kneels at the altar, receiving the communion host on golden paten. You step forward to partake, the wafer's saccharine taste fleeting on your tongue before slipping into dry resolve. Even in this hallowed moment, your mind drifts to distant Saxon villages and Lombard duchies, where allegiance must be won and kept. To rule is to serve, and to serve is to wield both mercy and might. As you kneel, you catch the scratch of quill on parchment, as courtiers record each oath in illuminated script, the first entries of a reign that will reshape Europe. A flourish of red and gold in the margins hints at titles yet unbestowed, lands yet unconquered. You lift your head as the mass concludes, torchlight dancing on chanting lips, and you feel the future press around you. An empire reborn in the shadow of Rome, tempered by northern winds, destined to span seasons and centuries. You file from the chapel's cool hush into a corridor thronged with nobles offering hushed congratulations. You grasp a fellow count's arm, sharing a knowing smile beneath your helm's brim. Both of you understand that tonight's euphoria precedes the arduous challenge of governance. Ahead, the palace awaits. Its feasts and debates, councils and councils yet to come. A world where every gilded arch and marble slab must be defended in word and deed. As you step into the torchlit gloom beyond the cathedral, you catch the first strains of a herald's horn. A summons to the banquet hall where tables groan under roast beasts and chalices overflow with spiced wine. You tighten your cloak and adjust your sword at your hip, feeling the crown's weight in your soul and the torch's warmth on your cheek. In this moment, you stand at the threshold of a new era, where legends will be written in flesh and flame, and the memories of today's coronation will echo through history like the ringing of a mighty bell. With steady breath, you follow the procession into the palace's golden glow, each step carrying you deeper into Charlemagne's reign and the promise of a world remade under lofty arches of stone and spirit. You step from the torchlit banquet into a quieter wing of the palace, where rows of wooden benches and long tables fill a vaulted hall lined with tapestries depicting biblical and classical scenes. Flickering oil lamps hang from wrought iron hooks, their pale glow illuminating faces half hidden beneath cowl hoods and fur-lined cloaks. The scent of melted tallow mingles with parchment dust and the faint tang of ink. This is the palace library and scriptorium, the heart of Charlemagne's scholarly revival. You find Alcuin of York standing at a lectern, robes brushing the marble floor as he adjusts a stack of sheepskin parchments filled with his elegant Latin script. Behind him, a young monk quizzes a group of novices on grammatical rules, their whispered responses echoing across arched ceilings. In the late 8th century, Charlemagne actively promoted learning among clergy and laymen alike, founding palace schools that became centres of the Carolingian Renaissance, a mainstream fact recorded in imperial capitularies. You inhale the musty aroma of vellum, feeling the weight of centuries of knowledge pressing in. A crackling hush falls as Alcuin raises his hand to demonstrate a tricky declension. His finger traces a line of red ink rubrication, the chapter headings in vivid vermilion that guide readers through dense theological treatises. You lean in, noticing tiny gold leaf dots that mark key passages, a fringe practice Alcuin pioneered to draw eyes to important text, though historians still argue whether these gilded accents were purely decorative or intended to confer spiritual illumination upon the words. You move to a nearby lectern where a monk grinds lapis lazuli into powder with a marble mortar, preparing pigment for illuminated initials. Each stroke of his quill transforms plain letters into ornate beasts and intertwining vines, their azure depths rivaling the Mediterranean sky. A quirky anecdote in a later chronicle claims Alcuin once scolded monks for using too much gold leaf, worrying it would distract from piety. But whether his admonition curbed the workshop's gilding zeal remains uncertain. The hall's long tables are strewn with codices in various languages, Old English glosses beside Latin psalms, Greek treatises on philosophy alongside Frankish legal codes. You pick up a heavy tome bound in oak boards, its spine reinforced with iron clasps, and open it to a page where runic symbols peek from the margins. These notes were added by wandering scholars from the north, recording sagas and laws in their native script, evidence that Charlemagne's intellectual court attracted minds from far-flung lands. You trace the angular runes with your fingertip, feeling the grain of aged wood beneath the text. Beyond the benches, a group of scribes sits in a semicircle under a vaulted arch, copying a Bible leaf by leaf. Their quills bend and snap against vellum, each letter formed with deliberate care. You note the gentle hissing of quill tips meeting ink and the soft scratching as text flows across the page. This meticulous labor was considered an act of devotion, a mainstream detail. Monks often spent entire days in silence, producing manuscripts for liturgical use and scholarly study. You close your eyes for a moment, hearing only the symphony of learning in motion. A sudden breeze stirs through a high window, lifting the edge of a tapestry depicting the creation. You step forward, catching a glimpse of Adam and Eve entwined with curling vines. You recall a fringe story about an apprentice who once added a tiny self-portrait in the corner of that tapestry, his face peeking beneath Eve's serpent, though no surviving embroidery shows any such. Intrusion. Scholars still debate whether that anecdote was early medieval graffiti or mere rumour spread by mischievous students. In one corner, a low table holds wooden tablets coated with wax, each etched with quill marks. Monks practice their Merovingian hand here, copying Charlemagne's own capitulary edicts for local officials. The tablet's surfaces bear layers of reuse, old text scraped away to make room for new decrees. A quirky detail. Monks sometimes discovered faint ghost images of earlier scripts beneath fresh inscriptions, and superstition held that these palimpsests recorded the voices of silent ancestors. You scratch at one tablet's edge, unearthing pale grooves from long-ago words. You approach a small shrine, erected in a recessed niche, a gold leaf icon of Christ Pantocrator, flanked by candlesticks. Pilgrims and courtiers pause here to pray before entering the learning halls. Nearby, a table displays small cast statues, no larger than a palm, carved in ivory and ebony, representing the school's patron saints. You pick up one statue of Saint Benedict, his brow furrowed in holy purpose, and sense the quiet reverence once felt here. Medieval scholars believed such icons facilitated memory retention during the recitation of texts, though historians still argue whether the practice was effective mnemonic technique or pious superstition. From a lofty gallery above, a horn signals the hour for vespers. You glance up to see the palace chapel's stained glass windows glowing with inner light, an imported luxury from Lombardy, their coloured panes a marvel in these years of revival. The music of distant psalms drifts down marble steps, and you realise the court's scholarly pursuits are intertwined with worship. Study and prayer are two sides of the same coin here. You take a slow breath, tasting incense's sweetness alongside the sharper tang of ink and tallow. As the hall fills with monks gathering their scrolls and closing chapters, you slip toward the exit, passing a final table where a scholar stands pondering a manuscript. He adjusts his spectacles, thin strips of horn, and resumes his reading with a soft sigh. You pause, noticing the deliberate calm of his posture, then step back into the torchlit corridor, the echoes of learning fading behind you. You tighten your cloak around your shoulders and descend a spiral staircase to join the Emperor's retinue once more, carrying the hush of the scriptorium in your mind. Ahead lies the Saxon frontier and campaigns in distant woods, but for now, the warm glow of scholarship and devotion lingers in your veins, a quiet flame amid the flicker of ambition and steel. You find yourself back at the heart of Aachen's bustling palace complex, where the clatter of stone masons mingles with the hiss of lime mortar and the tang of freshly cut marble. Here, in the shadow of the Emperor's throne room, work has begun on the Palatine Chapel, a soaring octagonal marvel destined to crown Charlemagne's legacy. Morning sunlight pours through open scaffoldings, gilding the dust motes that swirl around polished columns and half-carved capitals. The scent of wet plaster and heated stone fills the air, punctuated by the sharp tang of iron tools striking flint and marble. You step carefully across rough-hewn blocks, ribbons of ochre chalk, still marking where each course must sit, a mainstream detail drawn from surviving Carolingian building accounts. Each stone block has been quarried from distant Thuringian hills, its veins of grey and rose marble prized for resilience and beauty. You lay your hand on a freshly placed drum, feeling its surprising warmth under the noonday sun. A team of masons heave a massive column drum along a wooden roller, ropes straining as they guide it into a sloping ramp toward the chapel's second gallery. You lean in to study the groove cut around its circumference, an alignment notch ensuring perfect fluting once it is set aloft. A quirky guild anecdote speaks of master builders testing each drum by dropping a small stone into the hollow core and measuring its echo. Historians still argue whether this ritual was practical acoustics or a superstitious flourish. Nearby, sculptors stand atop rough platforms, chiseling capitals into stylized acanthus leaves and geometric interlaces that will frame the chapel's arches. Their tools tap in rhythmic unison, mallet on chisel, chisel on stone, producing a gentle percussion that echoes like distant bells. You crouch to examine a fallen carving, a half-formed lion's head, its mane flowing into vines, frozen mid-roar. You trace its unfinished jawline with your fingertip, sensing the sculptor's guiding hand and the moment when vision meets stone. The chapel's core rises around you, an 8-sided ambulatory ringed by thick piers and semicircular arches. Light filters through temporary lattice windows, painting pale patterns on the rough floor where mosaic artists will soon lay jewel-toned tesserae in intricate designs. You can almost hear the future clink of gold and glass, each tile pressed into mortar with careful fingers. A fringe account from later inventories claims that coloured glass was imported from Byzantium for these windows, though scholars still debate whether early glazing arrived by gift or caravan. At the central dome's base, carpenters raise scaffolding beams tied with leather thongs, their knotwork tested by master rope makers from Lyon. You climb a narrow plank to the second tier, breath-catching as you pass between columns toward the drum above. Here, the chapel's fate hinges on precise geometry. Each stone's slight taper ensures perfect spring of the arches. You rest a hand on a wedge-shaped voussoir, tasting faint limestone grit on your glove. A master mason crouches before you, using a plumb line weighted with lead to check vertical alignment. The plumb's bob swings with a soft hiss, tracing arcs in the air before settling against the stone's surface. You nearly laugh at the simplicity. An empire's greatest monument balanced on a string and a pebble. Yet the result is awe-inspiring precision. Courtiers will one day marvel at the chapel's harmony. Here, in its making, you witness careful human deliberation triumph over chaos. You step onto a timber platform beneath the chapel's oculus, where sunlight will later flood the central space in fiery splendor. A lone sculptor dips his mallet in pitch to seal the join between drum and capital, black resin gleaming against pale marble. This pitch will harden to create a waterproof seam, a technique borrowed from Roman builders centuries past. Observing its application, you taste the smoky resin on your tongue, a reminder that ancient methods endure in new forms. Below, apprentices carry carved blocks of porphyry, darker, denser stone, reserved for imperial accents. Up winding ramps, their youthful voices echo in the hollow shell, laughter mingling with grunt and hammer. You incline your head in respect. Every hand here, from master to novice, shapes the sacred form. The chorus of labour, wood on metal, metal on stone, stone on mortar, rises to a solemn hymn, the chapel's foundation in living sound. As midday wanes, the work pauses for prayer. A clear bell tolls from the adjacent chapel, calling builders to seek divine favour before midday meal. You join the circle of workers, bowing your head as sunlight slants through scaffold gaps, warming shoulders and cheeks. In the hush, you sense the chapel's rising spirit, a blend of faith and artistry that will endure long after mortar sets and mallets rest. You linger a moment longer, letting the cradle of arches and columns settle into your bones. Each stone holds the imprint of wrists and chisels, of breath and prayer. Then, with the master mason's nod, you step back onto the ramp, descending toward the court corridor where the emperor awaits. Beneath your feet, The chapel stands not yet complete, but alive with promise. A testament carved in marble and sweat to a reign that seeks to unite empire, church, and art under one vaulted sky. You emerge from the palace's torchlit shafts into the cold night air, the scent of pine and damp earth greeting you like an ancient promise. Around you, the Saxon forest looms, an ocean of dark silhouettes, where trunks rise like silent sentinels, and the moon's silver fingers scarcely pierce the canopy. You trudge alongside Frankish infantry, each man's breath visible in the chill, their armor clinking in time with your heartbeat. In the early 9th century, Charlemagne's campaigns against the Saxons pushed deep into these woodlands, the dense forests both shield and snare, a mainstream fact chronicled in royal annals. Your boots sink into soft moss and fallen leaves, the rich, loamy scent of decay mingling with the sharp tang of steel. Every step forward feels deliberate, a small conquest of nature itself. Torches bob in the darkness, their glow flickering on brambled undergrowth and ancient oaks whose bark bears claw marks from wild beasts, or perhaps fallen warriors. A fringe tale among camp followers claims that Saxon druids once enacted rites here beneath the old oaks, invoking spirits to guide or mislead armies. Historians still argue whether these rituals affected morale or were mere superstition whispered in fireside lore. Above you, the canopy shivers as a breeze drifts through, carrying the distant hoot of an owl or the rustle of unseen creatures. The infantry moves in ordered columns, shields locked in shield wall formation, spears levelled at the forest's edge. You can almost taste the tension, anticipation of ambush, the weight of unseen eyes tracking each footstep. You feel your hand brush the haft of your sword hilt, its leather worn smooth by countless grips. A sudden crack echoes ahead. A fallen branch, or perhaps a scout testing for traps. And the column halts with a low murmur. Torches flare as captains lean forward, scanning the shadows for movement. You breathe shallowly, the forest's hush magnifying every rustle. Somewhere beyond the torchlight, you imagine Saxon warriors crouched behind ferns and rocks, their curved sea axes ready to strike. You grip your cloak tighter, tasting the resinous scent of fir needles on your tongue. The forest path narrows into a broken track, where hoofprints and wheel ruts attest to earlier forays. You follow the battered path deeper, stepping over gnarled roots that snag at boots. In one fertile hollow, you spot shattered pottery and a lone wooden bowl cracked by cold, its rim etched with simple knotwork, a quirky remnant of Saxon daily life. You pause to touch the bowl's splintered edge, feeling the rough grain under your fingers. Scholars still debate whether such bowls were traded with Franks or looted from abandoned homesteads, but here it lies, a mute witness to cultural exchange and conflict. A distant flicker betrays a campfire beyond a stand of birch. As you approach, the smell of cooking, smoked fish, and coarse barley bread fills the air, mingling with campfires of pine boughs. Frankish cooks ladle steaming pottage into wooden trenchers, their thick broth a humble feast for weary soldiers. You accept a bowl, the warmth seeping into your chilled fingers as you sip, tasting leather tannin and a hint of wild herbs gathered from the forest floor. The sustenance feels sacred after hours of steady march. Even king's armies must break bread like any hungry traveller. Beyond the cooking fires, rows of canvas tents huddle against the night, their flaps tied back to reveal men dozing in chainmail, helmets cradled under heads. The low murmur of voices rises in earnest discussion. News of Saxon resistance, rumours of reinforcements, and calculation of supply lines. A mainstream detail. Carolingian armies relied on foraging and river transport, making such forest campaigns as much a test of logistics as of martial skill. You watch a quartermaster poring over a leather-bound ledger by lantern glow, tallying food, fodder, and the chaplain's stock of communion wafers. A sudden shout rings out, and you leap to your feet as a rider bursts through the tent rows, mud-splattered steed snorting in panic. The rider, a mounted sergeant, slams a folded dispatch into the captain's gauntleted hand before galloping off into darkness. You step forward to catch a glimpse. A hastily scrawled message warning of a Saxon warband converging from the north. The captain's eyes narrow, torchlight reflecting in grim determination. You tighten your grip on your sword, anticipation coiling in your chest like a spring. Orders crack through the camp. Form ranks, secure the perimeter, prepare for dawn skirmish. You follow soldiers into formation, the crunch of leaves and click of armor a steady drumbeat. In the eerie half-light, you peer into the woods, where every shadow seems to twitch with hidden life. Yet there is a solemn beauty here. The twilight veiling raw terrain in hushed mystery, a moment suspended between peace and violence. As the camp settles, you slip to the forest's edge, gazing into the silent grove where nightbirds flit among branches. The moon, now a pale crescent, bathes the scene in silver, and you inhale the cool air, tasting moss and smoke. You recall ambush tactics learned in training. Spread the line, use shields to deflect arrows, signal flutes to advance. Yet standing here, you feel the forest's ancient presence. A realm older than any emperor's claim, indifferent to conquest or crown. Before you return to the campfires, you kneel to gather a handful of soil and crushed leaves, pressing their fragrance to your nose. The scent of Saxon earth, like any soldier's vow, will travel with you beyond these woods. You rise, heart steady, and stride back toward the flickering lights of your comrades, ready to face the dawn's coming battle beneath these solemn trees. You descend a winding staircase carved into the palace's ancient bedrock, each step echoing like a tolling bell as you make your way to the imperial chamber where the emperor lies on a carved wooden bier draped in crimson cloth. The corridor is hushed, lit only by flickering oil lamps whose tallow smoke curls toward the vaulted ceiling. The air here is heavy with the scent of myrrh, frankincense, and the faint metallic tang of heated swords from the guard posted outside. In the waning days of Charlemagne's reign, his deathbed was a site of both reverence and political reckoning, a mainstream fact chronicled by church annals and Frankish historians alike. You step into the chamber, boots clicking softly on polished marble tiles inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Courtiers and bishops stand in silent rows, their faces drawn and pale beneath hooded cloaks. At the center lies the emperor, his breathing shallow, his skin drawn taut over angular cheeks. A simple circlet of gold rests upon a velvet pillow at his side, a silent testament to a crown soon to pass from his brow. You inhale the heavy scent of sacred oils anointed upon his temples and collarbones, then bow your head in solemn respect. Beside the bier, the eldest son, Louis the Pious, kneels in earnest prayer, his ornate gambeson stained with tears and sweat. His mantle, trimmed with sable, pools around him like a dark sea. You sense the weight of expectation in his bowed shoulders. To unify the empire and live up to a legacy built on both conquest and devotion. A fringe recollection from a later biography claims Louis secretly vowed to his father's ghost never to divide the realm, a promise historians still argue whether he truly kept or broke in the years to come. Behind Louis, the younger sons, Pepin of Italy and Charles the Younger, stand in regal silence, their youthful faces set in grim lines. They exchange furtive glances, each calculating his own claim. The room's hush is so deep you can hear the distant drip of water from a cracked stone basin in the corner, each drop echoing like a second slipping away. You remember that medieval physicians revered such basins for their purifying waters, though scholars still debate whether the water's medicinal use wafted into palace rituals or stayed confined to infirmaries. As you step closer, you notice the emperor's weakened hand resting upon a carved oak armrest. A simple ring of iron encircles his wrist, a pragmatic measure to prevent restless movement from dislodging scribes recording his final decrees. You lean in to read the neatly penned entries on the parchment laid across his lap, instructions for succession, division of lands, and the appointment of loyal counts to strategic duchies. Each clause carries the weight of a lifetime spent forging alliances and quelling rebellions. A soft sigh escapes Charlemagne's lips, and his eyelids flutter as if searching a distant horizon beyond his mortal coil. You catch a last glimmer of life in his pale eyes, fierce, resolute, yet tempered by a profound fatigue. Around you, the assembled clergy lift a final hymn in Latin, their voices rising in reverent tremor. The notes fill the chamber with a sonorous farewell that feels both mournful and triumphant. When the hymn concludes, Louis the Pious rises and steps to his father's head. placing the imperial circlet upon Charlemagne's brow once more, as a symbol of undying honor. In that instant, torchlight glints on the circlet's emeralds and pearls, casting emerald shadows across the marble floor. You feel a chill at the back of your neck, a silent acknowledgement that crowns bind the living and the dead in equal measure. As Charlemagne draws his final breath, the gathered court bows their heads. A solitary tear glides down Louis's cheek, his grief as real as the empire's fragility. You inhale the mingled scents of incense and despair, every inhale filled with the gravity of an ending, and every exhale carrying the burden of what comes next. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the true death of unity, or simply the first mortal fracture in a vast realm. You step back as Louis lifts his father's hand, and nobles step forward to pledge unwavering fealty to the new emperor. Their voices, some trembling, some resolute, fill the chamber with oaths that will shape the course of Europe. You listen as counts and dukes declare Vivat Rex in unison, their call a fragile thread weaving hope and fear into the empire's future. With the pledges complete, you turn away from the bier, your boots echoing a farewell as you exit the chamber. Behind you, the emperor's body lies still beneath the soft glow of candle flames, the crown resting upon his temples as a silent witness to both triumph and mortality. You walk through quiet halls where tapestries whisper of past glories, and portraits of ancestors glare from stone frames. Each step carries the echo of history's weight. Outside, the dawnlight filters through arched windows, bathing the palace in pale gold, a new day breaking over a realm poised on the edge of transformation. In the hushed glow of dawn, you pause on a marble balcony overlooking the palace grounds. The scent of dew-laden grass rises around you, mingling with morning incense from the chapel below. You clasp your cloak against the cool breeze and reflect on what you've witnessed: the passing of an emperor, the shifting of power, and the fragile hope that unity might endure. With a final breath, you turn from the vista and fade into the corridors, carrying the memory of Charlemagne's last moments like a precious relic. Ahead lies uncertainty, but also the promise of new beginnings under a successor's reign. And as the palace stirs to life, you step forward into the unfolding story of an empire reborn in the wake of an Iron Crown's fall. You pick your way over the mottled stones of the collapsed ramparts, each weathered block telling tales of siege and shelter lost to time. The air carries a whisper of damp moss and sun-warmed limestone, and as you step across the tumbled masonry, you hear the faint echo of hooves and the distant clang of steel, imaginings of watchmen long gone. In medieval Europe, town walls were often repaired and heightened over centuries, their tops patched with mismatched stones and recycled fragments from older ruins, a mainstream fact revealed by archaeological surveys. You pause to trace a finger along a chipped corner of a flint block, feeling the tiny crevices where mortar once clung, and recall a quirky record in a town chronicle of local masons complaining about stones that bite the hand when cutting too close to their edges. Historians still argue whether wall repairs prioritized speed over strength, or were deliberate palimpsests of communal memory. Ahead, a broad swath of loose earth drapes over an ancient trench. The original foundation trench sunk into the virgin soil when the walls first rose. You kneel at its edge, the soil soft under your palms, and begin prizing aside creeping grass and tangled roots. Each handful of turf lifted reveals fragments of worked stone and stray mortar lumps, their pale grey faces contrasting with the dark loam. You inhale the cool scent of earth and decaying leaf, and your fingers tingle as you uncover the top edge of a foundation block. Leaning back on your heels, you admire the even line of its face, still square despite 8 centuries of neglect. Working in tandem, your team clears more of the trench, revealing its U-shaped cross-section and the shallow clay marker trenches that guided the original ley lines. You shine a lantern into the dusk-hued furrow, watching motes of dust swirl as you sweep away grit with a soft brush. A fringe anecdote from a local legend tells of a night watchman who slept atop these foundations, dreaming of phantom invaders. Whether that tale arose from real haunting or village gossip, historians still debate. You tuck the story away as you map each newly exposed segment, marking chalk arrows on standing stones that survived the collapse. Above you, the sun dips low, casting the ramparts in gentle gold. You climb atop a surviving wall stump and survey the medieval town spread below. Roofs of terracotta tile, the spire of the parish church, and farm fields stretching beyond. The line of your newly exposed trench cuts a pale ribbon through grass, a visible scar in the living earth. A mainstream detail, medieval walls often followed property lines and natural contours, resulting in irregular profiles that families and guilds defended as fervently as the entire town. You note the subtle kink, where the trench jogs around a cluster of older houses, evidence of property disputes memorialized in stone. With the trench mapped and photographed, you step down into its shadowed hollow and begin laying wooden stakes along its length, each stake tagged with a number corresponding to your survey notes. Your gloved hand brushes dust from an old stake hole, and you peer inside to see the dark cavity where a yew stake once stood, now long rotted. The scent of resinous wood lingers faintly, and you imagine masons carving stakes from local timber, their axes cleaving bark and sap, the wood whispering of forests long since cleared. The trench widens ahead to reveal the base of a round tower that once guarded the town's northeastern approach. Here, the foundations deepen to twice the trench's normal width, built to carry heavier loads. You crouch to examine the corner of a massive foundation block, its surface chiseled with mason's marks. Simple diagonal incisions denoting the workshop that cut it. A quirky detail from surviving guild records claims each workshop used a unique mark so that apprentices owed a beer to any foreman who spotted miscut stone. Whether that custom held more cheer or expense, historians still argue. Raising your lantern, you explore the adjacent turret base, where circular stones form a rough ring sunk into compacted subsoil. Some stones bear names incised in Latin letters, perhaps mortared into place as memorials to donors or captives forced to labour here. You run a finger across one name, Ulricus, and wonder about the man who lent his name to this wall, a silent partner in defence. The mix of named and anonymous stones turns the foundation into a democratic ledger of those who shaped it, whether by choice or compulsion. As dusk falls, your team stuffs burlap sacks with loose soil from the trench, carrying them away for sieving later. You pause with a sack in hand and feel the weight of centuries pressing down through those grains of earth. Each handful will soon yield shards of pottery, bits of bone, and metal fragments, relics of everyday life intertwined with military purpose. The mixing of domestic debris in foundation fills speaks to the dual role of walls as both protective bulwarks and repositories of town memory. You step back from the trench edge and mark the line with a bright ribbon, ensuring its course guides tomorrow's excavation for the watchtower foundation. The ribbon flutters in the evening breeze, a modern signal on ancient ground. You squat to smooth loose stones back into place along the trench lip, respecting the fragile balance between excavation and preservation. Under the emerging stars, the trench glints faintly at its edges, a pale scar destined to guide new construction over old. With the first phase complete, you rise and unshoulder your pack, the lantern's glow soft against the twilight. The uncovered trench and foundation blocks stand ready for tomorrow's work, measured restoration of a medieval sentinel. You take one last look at the rampart's crumbled profile, where past defences meet future watchtower lines. Then, with a steady breath of night air, you turn back toward camp, lantern in hand, the trench's shadow trailing you like the promise of history's next layer. You return to the exposed trench at dawn, the air crisp with dew as mist drifts above the damp earth. Your lantern long since stowed, you rely on the pale morning light to guide your work. Today, you focus on the curious stones embedded within the medieval wall core, blocks of smooth marble and carefully dressed limestone, incongruous among rough-hewn rubble. In many medieval towns, builders recycled Roman-era masonry for new fortifications, a mainstream fact revealed by countless excavated sites. You kneel beside one such block, brushing away clinging soil to reveal its polished face and chisel marks worn soft by centuries. Beneath the block, you uncover a Latin inscription faintly carved, a dedication to a long-forgotten imperial builder. The letters are eroded but discernible, and you trace them with your gloved fingertip, feeling the groove's ancient depth. A fringe account in a local antiquarian's notes suggests these repurposed stones once formed a Roman temple foundation before being hauled here by medieval masons. Historians still argue whether such grand recycling honoured or desecrated the original structure. You slip the block aside gently, marking its location with a wooden peg for later study. Nearby, larger stones with distinct Roman tooling, parallel claw chisel marks, lie half buried in the trench's core. You strike your trowel blade against one to test its hardness, the metallic clang echoing in the quiet dawn. The stone rings with a bright tone, unlike the dull thud from local sandstone. You cross-reference in your mind the accounts of local quarries and confirm that no native deposit yields marble of this quality. These stones must have journeyed from Roman sites far afield. Your team uncovers more fragments: a column drum fragment marked by a lead pinecone boss, a threshold slab adorned with a vine scroll motif, and a segment of an aqueduct's voussoir stamped with an imperial mason's cipher. Each piece you reveal is a testament to continuity, the layering of civilizations in a single wall. You stack the fragments in neat piles by type: marble, limestone, sandstone, so specialists can later analyze their origins and the logistics of their medieval transport. As the trench deepens, you reach a massive foundation core where a seamlessly jointed Roman brick course appears beneath the medieval rubble. The bricks are long and flat, laid in a herringbone pattern, a hallmark of late antique construction. You clear the overburden carefully, exposing the full width of the earlier wall, a palimpsest of defense. A quirky village legend tells of a secret treasure buried beneath the Roman core, though no evidence has ever emerged. Historians still debate whether such stories grew from oral memory of hidden storerooms or from hopeful fantasies. You measure the depth of the Roman layer, over a metre below the medieval footing, recording its offset and orientation for your site drawings. The slight curve of the earlier wall subtly differs from the later line above, suggesting shifting boundary lines or defensive upgrades over time. You note these nuances in your field notebook. Roman core curves west by 2 degrees. Medieval repair realigns northward. Small details that reveal the town's evolving topography and strategic priorities. Next, you uncover a carved stone relief, 2 intertwined fish in shallow bas-relief, possibly a fragment of a Roman fountain panel. You brush it free and lift it, marveling at the delicate craftsmanship preserved beneath centuries of rubble. The fish scales glint faintly in the morning light, and you feel the artistry connect you to water-loving communities that thrived long before walls rose. You wrap the fragment in linen for transport, mindful of its fragility and the story it carries. Your trowel then strikes a metal object, a corroded iron ring bolt set flush within a foundation block. You pry it loose, revealing a rusted link once used to hoist stones or secure scaffolding. You hold the ring up to the light, imagining Roman masons hauling blocks from quarries to temple sites. The link's presence here speaks of monumental efforts repurposed by medieval builders pressed by need and resourcefulness. As the sun climbs higher, you step back to survey the trench's layers: the sun-baked topsoil, the medieval rubble core, and the smooth Roman courses beneath. Each stratum tells a chapter of the town's long defense, its people's ingenuity, and the enduring legacy of stone. You record final drawings, noting how reused masonry binds past and present in a single fortress wall. With your notes complete, you carefully refill sections of the trench to protect the uncovered masonry until conservation specialists arrive. The reused stones remain partially visible, a tantalizing glimpse of Rome's once glorious craftsmanship set within medieval purpose. You step away from the trench, the morning mist lifting as the town awakens, each building and street carrying forward the layered history you've just revealed. You arrive at the heart of the excavation site, where the medieval wall's U-shaped trench widens into a rectangular platform. This is where the watchtower will rise. The morning sun slants in pale gold across the rough-hewn stones you've laid as footing, each block set with careful precision. The air here carries the scent of damp earth mixed with lime mortar dust, and somewhere in the distance you hear the steady clang of hammer on chisel as masons prepare cornerstone blocks. Tower foundations in medieval Europe often began with a sacramental laying of the first stones, a mainstream fact drawn from builders' accounts of ritual observances marking new construction. You kneel on the packed soil, trowel in hand, as crews level the platform's surface. Your gloved palm brushes away loose grit, feeling the cold firmness beneath, soil compacted by centuries of footsteps and the weight of fallen ramparts. Beside you, a mason uses a plumb line weighted with a river pebble to ensure the platform's stones rise true and square. The line's soft swish against carved limestone echoes like a distant lullaby. A quirky local tradition held that masons buried a silver coin beneath the first cornerstone to invite prosperity, though historians still argue whether such coins were common practice or romanticized later by antiquarians. Standing, you instruct laborers to position a massive cornerstone block carved from local sandstone. Its face bears a single mason's mark, a simple cross within a circle, denoting the workshop that cut it. You slide oak wedges under the block, and laborers heave on a greased wooden lever, sending the stone inch by inch into its socket. Each slow shift sends plumes of dust swirling into shafts of light that dance on nearby scaffold posts. You taste the tang of iron from your tools, and your chest rises with measured breaths as you brace the lever's weight. Once the block seats with a satisfying thud, you signal the mortar mixer, a burly craftsman turning a shallow wooden trough where lime, sand, and water blend into creamy paste. The paste oozes between stone courses, binding them in a firm embrace. You dip your finger into the mortar, feeling its cool stickiness, and draw a quick token cross on the platform's edge, a benediction for strength. Some medieval builders believed a maker's mark, blessed with a sign of the cross, would endure storms and siege alike. Whether that was divine favour or superstitious comfort, historians still debate. Higher up the slope, apprentices heft smaller blocks into place, their youthful faces flushed beneath woolen caps. You direct them in the rhythm of placement. Stone, mortar, stone, mortar. Each cycle a step toward the watchtower's rising silhouette. The foundation's rectangular footprint measures 12 paces by 8, proportions drawn from treatises on military architecture that prescribed robust base dimensions to support multi-story structures. You recall that these manuals advised at least a third of a tower's height in foundation depth, a detail that ensures the tower will stand firm against wind and war. As midday approaches, you climb a short wooden ladder to inspect the foundation's inner corner. From your vantage, you survey the cleared trench lines, the neat stacks of quarried blocks, and the angular geometry unfolding beneath your boots. You spot a stray fragment of Roman brick wedged in the mortar, a relic you recorded earlier, proof that ancient layers lie interwoven with medieval design. This palimpsest of masonry reminds you how builders repurposed every useful resource, blending past techniques with new ambitions. Below, a group of labourers mixes a pig's bladder with boiled linseed oil to create a primitive waterproofing slurry. They brush the dark liquid onto the foundation blocks, sealing pores against rising damp. In some northern castellanies, this technique was prized for extending wall lifespans, an innovative detail that medieval engineers adopted from early Roman waterproofing recipes, though scholars still argue whether the bladder's collagen or the oil's resin provided the true barrier. You gesturally approve the slick coating, knowing it will protect the tower's base for generations. A low murmur rises among the labourers as a stone pillar, an ornamental newel, arrives by handcart. You guide it into the foundation's corner nook, the pillar's smooth surface contrasting with the rougher foundation stones. This decorative element will mark the interior stair, a luxurious nod to status uncommon in simple watchtowers. The pillar's presence sparks a fringe debate among local historians. Some claim it was salvaged from a demolished manor house, while others believe it was specially carved for the Duke's commissioned tower. You pocket the thought as you check its plumb, lying the pillar straight against the spirit level's bubble. The final cornerstone of the evening is set with a small copper plaque embedded in the mortar joint. Engraved with the date and the patron's name, it will serve as the tower's foundation inscription. You press the plaque into place and trace its cold edge with a finger, feeling the hammer marks of the engraver's punch. Many medieval builders included such plaques so that future generations could remember who commissioned and built these defences. Some later plaques were even gilded for greater prominence, though none here bear gold. As sunlight fades, you gather your tools and step back to admire the completed foundation. The fresh mortar glows pale in dusk light, and the stones stand in crisp alignment, a promise of strength rising from excavated earth. Behind you, the trench edges shine with dew, and the night breeze carries the scent of grass and distant hearth fires. You inhale deeply, savouring the moment when planning yields tangible form. Tomorrow's labours will raise the watchtower's walls atop this sturdy base, each course a testament to labourers' skill and communal will. You feel the foundation's firmness beneath your feet, a tactile memory you will carry through long hours of construction. As you turn to leave, the well-laid stones murmur of duty and vigilance, ready to bear the tower's weight and its watchful purpose. You walk back toward camp, boots crunching on loose gravel, the outline of future walls glowing faintly behind you. The newly formed base sleeps beneath the stars, awaiting dawn's first light and the next stone's careful placement. You return at first light to the cleared foundation platform, where mist still swirls around the base stones like pale ghosts reluctant to let go. Labourers have raked the dew-laden soil smooth, revealing the crisp rectangular outline your trench work established. The cold earth clings to your boots as you step onto the platform's edge and survey the horizon. Rolling fields, distant woodlands, and the town's tiled rooftops clustered beneath a pale sky. In medieval fortification, setting a solid base before raising walls was crucial. A poorly founded tower could sink or buckle, undermining the entire defence. A mainstream fact confirmed by numerous castle surveys across Europe. A mason calls for your attention, holding up a perfectly squared block of local sandstone destined as the tower's first wall course. You kneel beside the platform and brush away a tuft of grass, feeling the stone's cool surface and the damp grit beneath. With a swift nod, you signal the crew to bring the block forward on a greased sledge. Thick ropes looped through iron rings groan under the weight as men grunt in unison, sliding the block into place. You rest a guiding hand on its upper edge, aligning it precisely with the chalked guideline drawn at dawn. Once the block sits true, you gesture to the mortar team. They pour fresh lime and sand grout into the horizontal joint, the pale paste oozing around the block's base. You take a small stick and draw a shallow groove, known as a pointer's finish, to channel water away from the joint, ensuring longevity against rain and frost. Some medieval builders believed the groove's shape, often a simple V or U, could influence how water ran off. Historians still debate whether style choices reflected practical drainage or regional aesthetic preference. You step back and survey the line of newly set stones, each one heavy enough to challenge 10 men, yet placed today with care and precision. The wall's footprint now rises a single course, roughly 2 feet high, gleaming with fresh mortar. Apprentice masons gather behind you, peering eagerly as you show them how to check level with a carved wooden beam and plumb with a weighted string. Their eyes widen at the slow perfection of each placement. Stone, mortar, stone, mortar. A ritual that transforms earth into impregnable defense. Above, carpenters braid a scaffold of oak beams into place, lashing posts and crossbars with leather thongs. The scaffold's shadow falls across the platform, and you imagine the ringing melody of mallet and chisel echoing from its heights. A fringe anecdote survives of a master mason who once erected scaffolding so tall it caught the morning sun before the tower rose an inch. Whether that tale was pride or folly, historians still argue. You allow a wry smile, appreciating the craft's blend of audacity and humility. By midday, the second course is underway. You walk the platform's length, tapping each block's face with a mallet to test for voids beneath. Hollow sounds betray gaps in mortar that could weaken the wall. Each solid thunk offers reassurance. Stone and paste have bonded as intended. You pause at one block whose ring sounds dull, crouching to pry at its top edge. A thin sliver of unmixed sand peeks through. With a deft flick, you remove the excess and refill the gap, smoothing the joint until the block sings under your hammer's tap. Behind you, a small trench has been dug to channel excess mortar runoff down toward the inner courtyard, protecting the platform's edge from erosion. You kneel to inspect its gradient, about a 2-degree slope, and nod at the surveyor's careful work. Medieval builders often overlooked such minor runoff features, leading to waterlogged foundations. Here, attention to detail ensures the tower will stand firm through seasons of rain and freeze. Toward evening, the tower base rises 3 courses high, each layer narrower than the one below to taper weight gracefully downward. You stand on the scaffold's flagstone ledge, gazing down at the plinth now 8 feet tall. From this vantage, the town walls form an irregular snake wrapping around the settlement, and the newly built platform appears as a carved pedestal awaiting its statue. You inhale the crisp air, tasting lime and earth, and feel the tower's promise pressing into your bones. As the sun dips, you join the crew in wiping tools and stacking blocks for tomorrow's work. You trace your finger along the foundation's final visible course, noting the slight camber forward, a gentle bulge to counteract visual sag when the wall length rises above your head. Carolingian architects first adopted optical refinements like this in grand chapels. Applied here, they speak to a fusion of practical defense and aesthetic grace. Historians still debate whether such refinements were widespread or reserved for imperial commissions. Before leaving the platform, you place a small carved wooden token beneath a cornerstone, a personal talisman to safeguard the tower's endurance. The token bears your initials and the date, a silent signature in the foundation. Some medieval builders left similar marks. Others forbade personal marks as vanity. You hope your quiet gesture will be seen kindly by future hands. You step from the scaffold and descend the wooden ladder into the trench, where dusk shadows gather among moss and mortar drips. The platform glows with embers of work hard won, and you feel satisfaction settle alongside fatigue. Tomorrow, walls will climb skyward. Today, you've laid the groundwork. You pause at the trench lip and survey the rising base beneath starlit sky, its stones whispering of watchful nights to come. With a final nod to the silent stones, you gather your tools and leave the platform, the watchtower's foundations standing ready to bear both wall and warrior alike. You kneel beside a sieved basket of trench spoil, its burlap sides bulging with the soil you carried from the foundation fills. Early morning light filters through the trees, illuminating the fine dust that drifts upward as you sift the earth for hidden artifacts. Each scoop reveals fragments of daily medieval life. Pottery shards, bone fragments, fragments of iron nails, tokens of the townspeople who lived and worked beside these walls centuries ago. In post-medieval excavations, such small finds often paint vivid portraits of past routines, a mainstream fact supported by countless dig reports. Your gloved fingers lift a curved piece of broken ceramic, a jar rim painted with a looping vine motif. You hold it up to the sun, noting the subtle ivory glaze and the artist's steady hand. A fringe anecdote recorded in a local chronicle claims these jars once held spiced wine during festivals, imparting their vine pattern with festive nostalgia. Historians still argue whether such stylized motifs denoted celebratory wares or everyday tableware. You place the shard gently into a labelled envelope for further study. Below, you spot a corroded iron buckle, its frame twisted by time, and you carefully prise it free of hardened mud. The buckle's arched shape and surviving pin mechanism suggest it once fastened a leather belt, perhaps worn by a town guard or labourer hauling stones. You click the pin, marvelling at its simple ingenuity, and slip it into your finds pouch. Each buckle tells a story of garments and gaiters, of tools hung at belts and coins slung from pouches. A little further sifting reveals a small bone comb, its ivory teeth intact, though dulled by age. You trace the comb's line, imagining medieval townsfolk hurriedly grooming themselves before shifts in the town gate or crowded markets. Some combs carried maker's marks or decorative carvings, a sign of personal pride or social standing. But this one is plain, utilitarian. You smile at its modesty, aware that everyday objects often speak truer than luxury goods. Your trowel then glances against something larger, a heavy, smooth stone with a deep carved groove. You clear the soil around it and realize it's a fragment of a quern stone, used to grind grain into flour. The groove once held a metal adapter for a rotating upper stone. You lay it aside, considering the rhythms of daily baking that sustained the wall's defenders, from militia cooks to women who tended hearths. Scholars still debate whether quernstones were communal property or owned by individual households. Here, its presence in foundation fill hints at domestic debris repurposed in wall building. At the trench's far edge you uncover a small lead token, round and stamped with a simple cross. You lift it, noting its worn edge and faint relief. Lead tokens served as provisional currency in times of coin shortages, a mainstream detail documented in medieval economic records. You imagine townspeople exchanging tokens for bread or ale when coins ran low, the cross emblem ensuring trust in its value. You drop the token into your finds bag, its weight a reminder of economy's human face. As you sift, a dark lump catches your eye. A fragment of leather shoe sole hardened by time. You brush it free, revealing stitch holes where it once joined upper leather. The sole's curvature fits a small foot, perhaps a child's. You hold it with reverence, contemplating the steps of medieval youngsters echoed here in trench spoil. Archaeologists still argue whether such finds indicate casual loss or deliberate disposal. Either way, the sole whispers of tiny journeys among these walls. Near the trench lip, you uncover a rusted nail barbed at the end. A fencing spike used to secure wooden palisades atop the wall. Its long shaft and sharp head suggest defensive use, reinforcing the wall's parapet. You test its heft and slide it into your pouch, imagining carpenters driving rows of these spikes into oak planks to deter climbing attackers. The nail's presence in foundation fill hints at repair phases when wooden structures decayed and collapsed inward. Your final find is a small, flattened copper coin bearing a faint mint mark. You clean it gently with a brush, revealing the king's profile and an inscription in worn Latin letters. Copper pennies circulated widely in medieval towns, a mainstream numismatic detail recorded in mint records. You cup the coin in your hand, its cool surface connecting you to hands long since stilled, transactions made and debts settled at these very walls. With the basket empty, you gather your finds, trays, and document each item's location, depth, and context in your field notebook. Each line links objects to the wall's story: defense, domestic life, economic exchange. You step back from the trench edge, looking at the freshly formed foundation blocks above and the everyday relics below. The watchtower base and the artifacts together form a tapestry of past and present, of labor and life intertwined. As the sun rises higher, you pack your tools and finds for transport to the lab. The trench waits for conservation, the tower waits for walls, and you carry these buried relics forward, returning history's cast-offs to light. The trench in which you stood at dawn now rests silent beneath the rising sun, its stones and soil return to a careful repose. Each artifact you unearthed: the buckled belt, the broken jar rim, the child's shoe sole, whispers of lives, lived and labor spent upon these walls. Let your breath slow as you imagine those hands feeding the mortar, guiding the trowel, or spinning quern stones at hearth fires. Feel the weight of history settling gently on your shoulders, a mantle woven from both grand designs and humble moments. The watchtower's base, steady and squared in freshly laid courses, stands as a promise to the future, a sentinel yet unborn. Remember the rhythmic tap of mallet on chisel, the gentle swish of plumbline, the hush of dusty earth as soil slipped through your fingers. Each sound can guide you into calm awareness, each memory a stone in your own foundation of rest. Allow the soft hush of this scene to carry you beyond labor and dust into quiet reflection. Picture the scattered artifacts bathed in dawn's glow, copper coins gleaming, pottery shards warmed by sunlight, mortar seams glinting like silver threads. Let these images drift through your mind as water ripples in a calm pond. With each exhale, release the urge to unearth more. Instead, embrace the gentle curve of time, where past and present converge beneath your feet. As the world around you stirs to daily tasks, you remain in the tranquility of the whispering trench, a place where centuries of stories meet in patient earth. Now, drift into your own foundation of rest, carried by the soft echoes of stone and soil, of toil transformed into memory. Let the watchtower's promise of vigilance ease into the watchful quiet of your dreams. Sweet dreams.